Hi folks, Ryan Molloy here, managing editor at theseniorlist.com, and today we're taking a closer look at the Iris Connect from Consumer Cellular. So if you're looking for a smartphone from Consumer Cellular, you've got a wide range of options, including the newest offerings from Apple and Samsung, which can easily run you for over $1,000. But if you're looking for something more affordable, and I mean much more affordable, then the Iris Connect might be your best option. At $89, the Iris Connect is the cheapest smartphone I've reviewed at the Senior List, and with its large touchscreen, Android 13 operating system, and 13 megapixel camera, it's definitely more advanced than the flip phones offered at relatively the same price point. But that said, this strangely low price point begs the question: are you better off spending a bit extra for an iPhone SE, or maybe even a Jitterbug? Before we dive into this review, I'd like to remind you to hit the subscribe button below, and if you want to see more videos of me testing out phones, hearing aids, medical alerts, or even just ranting, be sure to also check us out on TikTok. Alright, let's dive into it.
So for starters, this phone has a 6.5-inch touchscreen on the front, as well as an 8 megapixel selfie camera. On the back side of the phone, you'll find the lone 13 megapixel camera, beneath this, a flash, and beneath this, a fingerprint sensor. This can be used to unlock the phone as well as access any saved passwords or payment information you find in various apps. On the bottom and edge of the phone, you'll find a USB-C port for charging. On the right-hand side, you'll find a volume rocker as well as the lock button. All this is pretty standard stuff for Android phone. One major exception here would be on top of the phone, you'll find a 3.5mm headphone jack. While I do prefer a headphone jack to be at the bottom of my phones, I find it a little more convenient, I do appreciate that there is a jack at all, considering most smartphones have begun phasing them out. So under the hood, this phone operates on Android 13, it has a Qualcomm 2GHz processor, 32GB of internal memory, Bluetooth 5.0, and it's rated M3T3 in terms of hearing aid compatibility. Although Consumer Cellular did not list the battery capacity of this phone, I did find it got roughly 30 hours of talk time and 4 days on standby, which is pretty good for a phone at this price point. And as far as I could tell, the call quality on this device was pretty solid. Audio came in clearly both on Wi-Fi and cellular calls, and I also tested this device with my hearing aids and noticed no audio interference here. My first complaint though would be with the limited memory of this phone. As I mentioned, it has 32 gigabytes of internal memory, and while this might sound like a decent amount of memory on this phone, you'll notice that roughly 17 gigabytes of this phone's memory are taken up just with the operating system and the apps that come pre-installed on this phone. And sure, you can expand the memory with a micro SD card, but I don't really like doing that. It can be costly, and we're just evaluating what's here. My other complaint with this phone so far would be its design, especially on the back. I don't know if you can really see it, but there's this kind of ridged plastic. It feels a little bit cheap, and already in a couple areas it started to wear, and I've had this phone for roughly a week. Then again, this phone is $89, so with the money you save, you could buy a $10 case for it. So as I mentioned, the Iris Connect operates on Android 13. While it's not yet compatible with Android 14, I think 13 will likely suffice for most users of this phone, as the improvements in 14 are pretty minor. So let's take a look at the lock screen. To unlock the phone, you can either type in your passcode, 1, 2, 3, 4, you'll never guess that. Or to unlock the phone, you can use the fingerprint sensor. I found this was a really convenient way to do it. There we go, unlock. On the home screen, you'll find a dedicated Google search bar, some commonly used apps like Calls, Messages, Chrome browser, and the camera, and you'll also find some other apps that come pre-installed on this Android phone. All pretty standard Android stuff here. When you're in an app, you can use this menu down here. The triangle button will bring you back to the previous screen. The circle button will bring you home. And the square button, as with other Android phones, allows you to view all the apps that are currently open, toggle between them, turn them off. Let's go back home. And so it's important to remember that Android phones are highly customizable. So in this folder, for example, I have all of my Google Suite apps, but let's say I wanted to add Google Maps directly onto my home screen. I can just hold that down, slide it over, and boom. Now it's on my home screen. Additionally, let's say I wanted to download Spotify. I can then go to the Google Play Store, search Spotify, And there we have it. Now I have Spotify. So again, if you've ever used an Android phone, all of this is really standard here. The thing I wanted to demonstrate though is just really how fast this phone performs, particularly for a phone of this price point. Sometimes with really cheap Androids, you'll notice a discernible lag or slowdown when switching between apps, opening apps, downloading apps, but everything on this phone I found was pretty smooth. Definitely for $89, that impressed me. So I keep saying that this phone is like your standard Android phone, and that's because it is. If you've used one Android phone, you've pretty much used them all. Similar to how if you've used an iPhone SE, you can pick up an iPhone 15 and the experience will be more or less the same. Because of this, I'm not going to bother going through every single feature of this phone, downloading every single app on the Google Play Store and seeing how they perform. Instead, I'm going to focus on the features that I think are most relevant to older adults. One feature that I want to highlight is Google Assistant. With this feature enabled, you can use voice commands to open apps and look up information online. To activate Google Assistant, you can either hold down the lock button or you can say, "Hey Google." Hey Google. Alright, so notice how down there we have this text box coming up and it's capturing the words that I'm saying. Okay, let's get out of that. Hey Google, what's the weather today?
It'll be sunny with a high of 48 and a low of 29. Currently it's 46 and sunny.
So in addition to looking up information online, you can also ask it to trigger some apps. Hey Google, open messages.
Opening messages.
So there we have all my messages. Interesting enough, another little quirk of this phone, I pulled it out of the box and I immediately had some text messages from Macy's. Don't know if that'll be just me or someone else. Let's try another command. Hey Google, who is playing in the Super Bowl?
Super Bowl 58 will start on Sunday at 6:30 p.m. at the Allegiant Stadium in the Las Vegas Valley, Nevada. The San Francisco 49ers will face the Kansas City Chiefs.
Alright, we'll see how that game goes. So notice how when I ask questions about the Super Bowl and the weather, those are questions that have definitive answers, and so Google Assistant was able to give me definitive answers. If, however, you ask something a little more vague or subjective, it'll just run a web search for it. Hey Google, where is the best pizza in Rhode Island?
I found a few places near you.
Alright, so see how even though the answer to this question is my uncle Jeff's place, Merlino's Pizza, it's showing us a variety of options in Rhode Island because there's no definite answer here. It's just running essentially a Google search for what I said. Something that disappointed me about this phone was its lack of voice-to-text features. As you probably know, on any Android phone, you can use your voice to dictate text messages. So for example, let's go to my messages. Let's say I want to tell Macy's to stop sending me more promotional messages. Normally, you could press this microphone button right here and dictate a message. For some reason though, on the Iris Connect, this does not work. Stop sending me messages. So I've tried to troubleshoot this a bit, but nothing really seems to work. I hope it's maybe just an issue with the software. The problem persists even when you go to Google search. How do I get Macy's to stop messaging me? As you can see, it doesn't really capture my words as it's supposed to. So that I'd say is a big flaw here, but hopefully they can eliminate that with a software update. So as I mentioned, the Iris Connect has two cameras. On the rear, you'll find a 13 megapixel camera with flash, and on the front, you'll find an 8 megapixel selfie camera. So just to give you a preview, here's what the camera app looks like. Pretty standard. I'm gonna go selfie mode, you just click that button. Oh, hello, here I am. And so overall, I would say the quality of the images was a bit lacking. It can't really hold a candle to other smartphones on the market. For outdoor images, I noticed a significant lack of clarity. Indoor images, I noticed a strange overrepresentation of white, both regular photos and selfies. That said, I had no delusions that an $89 phone could keep up with an iPhone or Samsung Galaxy. If, however, I would compare this Iris Connect to a phone at its price point, like the Jitterbug Smart 4, then I think the Iris Connect comes out much more favorably. So at first glance, the Iris Connect and the Jitterbug Smart 4 look nearly identical. Each is an Android phone with a large touchscreen that occupies the front of the phone. However, the Jitterbug Smart 4 has a slightly larger screen at 6.7 inches compared to 6.5 inches. The Iris Connect, however, has a slightly larger resolution at 1612 by 720. Practically speaking though, the difference is negligible and the phones look nearly the same. In terms of cameras, both phones have a 13 megapixel rear camera and an 8 megapixel front-facing camera. However, the Jitterbug Smart 4 has 2 additional 2 megapixel cameras on the back, giving it 3 in total. That said, I really didn't notice much of a difference in the camera performance between the two devices. The phones perform similarly in terms of battery life, call quality, and hearing aid compatibility as well. The most noteworthy difference between the two phones would be their interfaces. While the Iris Connect has the standard Android interface, which I think we've already delved into enough, the Jitterbug Smart 4 has a highly streamlined interface. So even though Jitterbug Smart 4 is a standard Android phone that can download anything from the Google Play Store, it has these streamlined systems of menus, and even the apps themselves are optimized to be a bit more simple. That is something you won't find on the Iris Connect. The Jitterbug Smart 4 also has some emergency response features. You'll notice that my button is disabled right now because I'm not going to keep paying for a lively monthly bill, but in theory, you can pay an extra fee to have an instant connection to urgent response call center agents. So this is great for someone who's prone to falls or having medical emergencies. The Iris Connect, however, at least on the phone itself, does not offer any type of urgent response features. However, there are some apps you can download to get this. Overall, if you're looking for a phone that is easy to use, I would say the Jitterbug Smart 4 is your better option. If, however, you want a cheaper phone, one that is a bit more advanced and you're not scared of the learning curve, then the Iris Connect will likely be what you're going for. The Iris Connect is also compatible with Consumer Cellular plans that make it even more affordable than Lively's plans, which tend to be on the pricier side. To learn more about the Jitterbug Smart 4, check out our full review. So overall, here is what I liked about the Iris Connect. With the Android operating system, the Iris Connect has access to all the apps, accessibility features, and privacy features of the latest Android phones. It's also highly affordable. You guys, I can't really get over the price point here. Costing $89 and compatible with Consumer Cellular's affordable plans, the Iris Connect is one of the most budget-friendly options in wireless today. I also appreciated the long battery life of this phone. In our test, the Iris Connect lasted 30 hours on a single charge, which is pretty long for a smartphone. And lastly, although I was ragging on the camera quality earlier, I do think that the Iris Connect's camera quality is much better than other phones at this price point, particularly if you're looking at a flip phone instead. In terms of the cons, I think this phone is a little bit complicated, particularly for someone who's never used an Android. I think it's very feasible that you might end up getting lost and there will be a steep learning curve involved. The other issue I have would have to be the memory, guys. I think it's a little ridiculous that this phone has 32 gigabytes of memory, and even right after I purchased the phone, more than half of that is already taken up with apps and the operating system. And I don't know about you, but I really don't know anyone who's ever actually put a microSD card in their phone. The last issue I have with this phone would have to be its lack of 5G. While Consumer Cellular does offer 5G on its data plans, the Iris Connect is only compatible with 4G. So for heavy users of data, this will mean slightly slower speeds when you're not connected to Wi-Fi.
But if you're looking for a smartphone for under $100, one that can take decent photos, make video calls, and access the limitless possibilities of the Google Play Store, then I would wholeheartedly recommend the Iris Connect. To find videos of us reviewing other Consumer Cellular phones, check out our channel. And to read our full written review of this phone, as well as our rundown of Consumer Cellular's service and plans, click the links in the description. Until next time, I'm Molloy with theseniorlist.com. See ya!